Tumbleweeds skitter across a desolate street. Sun-bleached timbers creak. Somewhere, a church bell tolls noon. We think we know what comes next. 2 men, 6 shooters, silence. Yet every so often a Western blows the dust off that ritual and builds a new kind of reckoning, sometimes lyrical, sometimes savage, always unforgettable. Tonight we rewind celluloid history to spotlight 10 classic Westerns that reinvented the final shootout. Stagecoach, 1939. At first glance, Stagecoach seems cut from traditional cloth. A fugitive gunslinger, a corrupt banker, a drunken doctor, and a pregnant army wife jolting across Apache territory toward Lordsburg. But Ford's genius is to plant his climactic gunfight not in the dusty Main Street, but in the roiling emotions of a rolling prison on wheels. When Ringo finally steps off the coach at nightfall, he doesn't swagger beneath swinging saloon lamps. He ghosts through alleyways, framed by darkness, hunting Luke Plummer's gang. The coach journey has welded character arcs so tight that every shot fired feels like the detonation of pent-up social tension, class prejudice, moral hypocrisy, even federal policy toward native nations. Ford punctuates the showdown with abrupt, nearly modern jump cuts instead of leisurely wide shots, collapsing distance and time so audiences feel each bullet before they see it. And he lets silence swallow most of the score so the scrape of boots and the metallic click of a Colt hammer become percussion. By uprooting the duel from the expected sunlit strip to a noir-tinted labyrinth, Stagecoach declares the Western can be part thriller, part social chamber drama, and still deliver a thunderclap of catharsis. High Noon, 1952. Fred Zinnemann turns a 12 o'clock showdown into a ticking clock morality play. Marshal Will Kane, freshly married and minutes from retirement, learns outlaw Frank Miller is arriving on the noon train. From that moment, the film unfolds almost in real time. Minute hand and narrative march together. Instead of gunsmoke bravado, Zinnemann shows us sweat, hesitation, church committees debating civic image. When Kane finally steps onto that glaring street, the town is a ghost, windows shuttered by cowardice. The gunfight itself, scattered alley skirmishes, echoing footsteps on wooden sidewalks, lasts mere moments, but every second throbs because the audience has shared the long, silent wait. Dmitri Tiomkin's minimalist snare beats mimic a heartbeat, while low-angle shots make the clock tower loom like fate. Most radical is the aftermath. Kane flings his tin star into the dirt and leaves. No raised rifle, no cheering crowd. Just disillusionment ringing louder than any pistol crack. High Noon redefined suspense, proving that a duel's power lies less in choreography than in the moral vacuum surrounding it. Shane, 1953. George Stevens bathes his final gunfight in melancholy instead of triumph. The mysterious gunslinger Shane strides into saloon light so dim it feels underwater, confronting Jack Palance's satin-gloved killer, Wilson. Prior Westerns glorified quick-draw artistry. Stevens draws out the prelude, boots scraping sawdust, bar glasses trembling, until each second is unbearable for Joey, the wide-eyed farm boy watching from the shadows, and for us. When guns bark, they don't ring. They explode like artillery, reverberating through the valley outside. This sonic design was revolutionary in 1953, as were Stevens's shockingly quick edits. Shane fires twice, Wilson is hurled backward, yet the eye registers only blurs of blue-gray smoke. The fight's final note isn't victory, but sacrifice. Shane's shoulder is slick with blood, and he slips into twilight, forever outside the domestic haven he just rescued. The shootout thus becomes a baptism that cleanses the frontier but damns the savior, giving the Western its first truly elegiac gunfire coda. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 1962. John Ford returns to the Western only to demolish its sacred ritual. For most of the film, we follow bookish lawyer Ransom Stoddard as he squares off with sadistic outlaw Liberty Valance. The town braces for a street lamp showdown straight out of dime novel lore. A trembling tenderfoot versus the frontier's most feared gun. We see the duel in stark chiaroscuro. Muzzle flashes bloom like lightning, Valance collapses, and newspapers crown Stoddard a hero. But Ford yanks the floorboards loose in the last reel. That fatal shot was fired from the alley by aging cowboy Tom Doniphan, hidden in shadow. The final shootout happened exactly as legend recorded, but from an angle the public never saw. By relocating the true gunfire off-screen and revealing it only in retrospective confession, Ford reframes the Western duel as political theater, a story people need rather than an event they witness. The camera lingers on Stewart's haunted eyes as he realizes democracy on the prairie is mortared with secret violence. When a newspaperman tears up the account, declaring, "When the legend becomes fact, print the legend," Ford fires the last bullet, not from a Colt, but from a printing press, proving the most dangerous shootout is between truth and memory. The Wild Bunch, 1969. Sam Peckinpah opens with children giggling at scorpions being devoured by ants. He ends with men shredding one another in a Gatling gun hailstorm. Between those two images lies the most pyrotechnic finale the genre had ever seen. Pike Bishop and his aging band march into a Mexican army compound to rescue brother-in-arms Angel. No tense countdown, no quick draw elegance, just a handshake, a wry grin, and the first exploding cartridge that ignites cinematic mayhem. Peckinpah shoots at 24 FPS, 30 FPS, and 60 FPS simultaneously, intercutting slow-motion deaths with real-time chaos, so every bullet feels like it ricochets across time itself. Blood squibs detonate like crimson fireworks. Children watch, terrified, from doorways. By staging the final shootout as mutual annihilation rather than moral victory, the Wild Bunch argues the frontier's endgame is entropy, no heroes, only carnage, and the brief, defiant choice of how to meet it. When the guns finally stutter empty, silence rushes in like a vacuum, broken only by wind and buzzing flies. Peckinpah doesn't reinvent the duel, he atomizes it, scattering its pieces across New Hollywood and forever raising the bar for visceral realism. Once Upon a Time in the West. If Peckinpah paints in blood, Sergio Leone composes in breath and heartbeat. His climactic duel between taciturn harmonica and dapper psychopath Frank unspools on a sun-blasted plain ringed by half-built railroad trestles, progress stalled by revenge. Ennio Morricone's score begins not with trumpets, but with the wheeze of a harmonica echoing across emptiness, each note a ghost from a buried past. Leone lets the camera glide in hypnotic slow zooms, eyes twitch, fingers flex, dust eddies. Minutes stretch toward eternity until Bronson's pistol snaps upward in a single, balletic blur. Yet the real reinvention is narrative. Leone intercuts the draw with a long, suppressed flashback. Young Bronson, forced to stand on his brother's shoulders beneath a tightening noose. Fonda's silhouette directing the cruelty. The past isn't prologue. It erupts into the present, making every gunshot a time-travel arrow completing its arc. When Frank falls, the harmonica theme finally resolves, and Bronson walks away as locomotives scream progress behind him. Leone thus re-engineers the shootout into a symphonic finale where music, memory, and movement fuse into myth. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. Until Sergio Leone, showdowns were duets. He turned them into geometry. At the vast, sun-blasted Sad Hill Cemetery, Blondie, Angel Eyes, and Tuco step inside a ring of crumbling gravestones. There are no townsfolk watching, no ticking clocks, only Morricone's ecstasy of gold, a spiraling lament that makes dust devils feel like spirits. Leone widens the lens to show all three men pinned by distance, then slams into eyeball-close inserts, sweat beading, pupils twitching, fingertips hovering above pistol grips. By cycling through ever-tighter edits, medium, close, extreme, closer, he turns 360 silent seconds into a visual crescendo where we breathe in sync with the gunmen. Then, one beat after Morricone's choir reaches its apex, pistols crack almost simultaneously. Leone cuts between frames at different camera speeds, 24 FPS for Angel Eyes' fall, 30 FPS for Tuco's frantic hammer clicks on an empty chamber Blondie sabotaged off-screen, so the moment feels stretched and snapped at once. The duel's reinvention is twofold. First, the triangular standoff makes every man both hunter and prey. Second, victory is decided not by fastest draw, but by unseen pre-planning, turning the shootout into psychological chess. When dust settles, Leone pulls slowly back to reveal the tiny scar of violence inside an endless graveyard, hinting that the West's final reckoning is swallowed by the very land it tried to tame. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969. George Roy Hill trades the lone Main Street duel for a last stand on the far edges of empire. Outlaws Butch and Sundance flee to Bolivia, hoping their six-gun skills still matter. By the finale, they're cornered in a clay brick alley, wounded and out of ammunition. Drums thunder in Burt Bacharach's score like distant hoofbeats, but the soundtrack fades as the pair barrel through a plan that's half bravado, half fantasy. We'll jump out shooting. The camera circles them in a desperate, intimate two-shot, a broken-down modern cavalry charge in embryo. Hill cuts to a sky-high long shot. Dozens of Bolivian soldiers fan out, rifles leveled. Instead of the customary barrage of gunfire, the director freezes the frame on Butch and Sundance as they explode from cover, pistols raised, mouths open in a rebel yell we never hear. A sepia wash creeps over the tableau, transforming flesh and blood men into an outlaw daguerreotype. Gunshots ring out only on the soundtrack over a still image, blurring line between movie myth and newspaper legend. Audiences supply the unseen bullets, finishing the duel in their imagination. By ending mid-action and suspending death in amber, Hill reinvents the shootout as a question mark. Are they cut down, or do they ride forever in Western folklore? The freeze frame invites every succeeding Western to experiment with ambiguity, proving that sometimes the boldest gunfire is a shutter click that never moves again. Open Range, 2003. Kevin Costner's Open Range feels like a chamber western until its finale detonates almost in documentary time. For 2 hours, we live inside the quiet rhythms of free grazers, Charlie Waite and Boss Spearman, coffee by the fire, horses blowing in dawn mist. So when corrupt rancher Denton Baxter traps their friend and terrorizes the town, the reply arrives with volcanic intimacy. Costner stages the showdown in a cramped mud street, scattering townsfolk who cower in doorways the camera barely glances at. The duel's true audience is us, hearing every echo. There's no score, only ragged breaths, clacking spurs, the dreadful metallic whump of Springfield rifles. Costner shoots mostly at eye level with long lenses, compressing distance so bullets seem to cross the frame faster than thought and kick up splinters you can almost taste. Each reload becomes a drumbeat of mortality. Charlie snaps shells from his belt. Boss fumbles with a double barrel. Young Mose fires nervously and pays in blood. Yet the reinvention lies deeper than audio pyrotechnics. When Charlie strides forward to challenge Baxter, he drops the polite Western pause. No counting, no circling, and fires point blank while the villain is still mouthing threats. The gunfight sprawls into side alleys, livery stables, and eventually the hotel stairwell, morphing from formal duel to savage urban melee that feels unchoreographed. By letting shots ring out in awkward volleys, cartridges jam, and men scream in panic, Open Range transforms the final shootout from ballet to reportage, reminding us the West was settled not by mythic clean draws, but by chaotic, deafening violence, with courage sometimes measured in how long you keep moving through the smoke. Unforgiven, 1992. Clint Eastwood's Oscar-laden elegy doesn't just reinvent the last gunfight, it writes the eulogy for every showdown that came before. Former outlaw William Money, a widowed hog farmer trembling on the edge of guilt and poverty, rides to Big Whiskey to collect a bounty on 2 cowboys who disfigured a prostitute. Sheriff Little Bill Daggett enforces order with a carpenter's grin and a sadist's fist, convinced he's the story's hero. By the time Money arrives at Greeley's saloon for the finale, all notions of white hat honor have been stripped away. His best friend Ned is dead, and displayed outside like a warning placard, the Schofield kid is shaking with PTSD, and Money himself has relapsed into whiskey-soaked wrath. What follows is less duel than execution. Rain pelts the clapboard roof while lanterns sputter, tinting every frame jaundice yellow. Money bursts through the doors, shotgun leveled, and before a single line of Western bravado can be spoken, he blows the bartender across the room in a spray of lamp oil and fear. When the smoke clears, Little Bill's deputies are cornered behind tables, trembling. Eastwood abandons the slow-draw symmetry beloved by Ford and Leone. He floods the space with overlapping shouts, ricochets, splintering glass, and terrified civilians scrambling under billiard tables. Money reloads with shaking hands, eyes burning like forge coals, and the camera tracks each kill in pitiless medium shots. No romantic slow motion, no angelic chorus, only heavy breaths and the clank of brass casings on warped floorboards. At the end, Little Bill crawls through puddled whiskey begging for mercy. Money answers with a single ugly blast, then turns to the gawking citizens. Any man don't want to get killed, better clear on out the back. With those words, he collapses the moral scaffolding of every tidy town square duel. The final shootout, Eastwood insists, was never about bravery. It was about broken men living with what their bullets left behind. When Money rides off into a black squall, the western sun finally sets. From Ford's rolling stagecoach to Eastwood's rain-soaked nightmare, each of these 10 classics pulled the trigger on tradition and forced audiences to hear new echoes in gunfire. Next time a screen door slams against desert wind and two silhouettes square off beneath the sun, remember, that moment was forged by decades of directors who dared to aim their cameras where bullets had never flown before.